Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, what I'm going to be doing is this is going to be the third in the series of how to skip and strategy videos. So I already released one on QR where I talked about my basis behind skipping questions and skipping passages, that kind of, skipping sets, and the best ways in terms of like how to do a full walkthrough through QR, which questions I would answer, etc., etc. And then I did a second follow-up video on decision making, where especially strategy is crucial because even before going into the exam, you know that there are 6 clear sections and you know that there are going to be an appropriate amount of questions in each of the sections, therefore making it even more apparent for us to have a good strategy. Okay, so this one has been another one that's been highly requested, and I talked a little bit about it in my verbal reasoning guide video. So if you guys haven't seen that video, I'd highly recommend you go to my channel, you go to playlists, and you click on verbal reasoning, and you'll see there's only 2 videos in there because there really wasn't too much to talk about in regards to verbal reasoning. It's not really like decision making, where there's clear kind of techniques for each section, but there are still some important things to think about. So if you guys would like to go over there, watch that first, and then come back here to then incorporate some of the ideas and things that we talk about and discuss. Okay, so what I'm going to say is I'm just going to pull up a bunch of question sets. I'm going to talk you guys through my logic for which questions I would do, which ones I would skip, and just in general a couple of things. So like I said, so some of this content will have already been covered partially in the all you need to know about verbal reasoning guide. However, I think this is going to be a little bit more kind of fast paced in the sense that you get to actually see how I would apply it to some of the questions as such. So I'm just going to start off with 6 question sets. Remember, I'm not trying to do these like exactly kind of to a time standard right now, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show you which questions I would do. So here for example, so it says King George is mentioned because he founded an asylum in order to provide care for his son. He was falsely rumored to be psychotic by his adversaries. His poor mental health made psychiatric care a national priority. His psychosis was attributed to the pressure of a ruling a country. So here, I probably would skip this passage. Okay. However, right. So you guys are probably thinking, oh, surely you would skip this passage. It's really, really long, right? But one of the things that I personally really like is when information is divided into paragraphs. It just, for some reason, I'm just able to understand the information better, even if it's a longer passage. Okay. So here, this question, like I said, it's a probable skip. But even though it's really long, like I said, my speed reading is somewhat decent, and having it in paragraphs just helps me dissect the information. Okay. So I would potentially do this question. The reason why I would do this question is because this is a question where the question is directed towards one idea. So King George III is mentioned. So all I have to kind of do is look for King George III. Okay, as opposed to a question like this one. According to so not this one. So here, for example, the writer implies that. So you can see here. So I know this was the 4th question in the set, but if this question had been question 1, what I would have done is I would have skipped this question, and then I would have gone to try and do the others, and then in doing the others, I would have come back afterwards to this question. Hopefully by then, I would have had enough enough information to be able to solve this question. Okay, so there is a logic behind this. So I think, remember, in quantitative reasoning, the strategy is a little bit different. So in quantitative reasoning, I said you should try and pick out individual questions. Okay, because remember, it's not about remembering, right? In verbal reasoning, you got to have a bit of memory. Memory is the important idea. So it doesn't really make sense, in my mind, for you to do 2 out of 4 questions in a set just because those 2 are the easy ones, and then not do the other 2. Because if you think about it, for example, by doing 2 of the questions, let's say theoretically you've got 50% of the knowledge. So then if you try and complete the other 2 questions, technically you only need to gain another 50% more to be able to do the questions, right? This is assuming that you need to read the whole thing to understand all the questions. This is just an assumption, and this is like the worst case scenario, right? So in that case, if you did the questions 3 and 4 after doing questions 1 and 2, obviously I'm not saying necessarily 1 and 2 in terms of the order, but just any 2 questions in the set. Let's say you left the other 2 because they were harder ones like this. If you leave them right now, and then, so the point you're at right now, you've got 50% knowledge, you only need to learn another 50% to get an idea of what, hopefully solve the questions. But if you leave it, and then you come back to these questions, because verbal reasoning is all about memory, in my opinion, it really doesn't make sense for you to leave the question and come back to it. Because by the time you go through, do other passages and come back to this, your retention of this, remember the 50% knowledge you had will be back down to about 0 or 10%. So you've got to work it all the way back up to 100%. So the relative amount of effort you have to put in is like you have to get 90% of the work. You have to do 90% additional of the work in order to be able to answer that question, whereas before it was only 50%. Do you see? But also, like I said, the order in which you do them matters as well. So a question like this, for example, it says the writer implies that. So here, this is probably going to be to do with the whole general idea of the passage. And obviously, like I said, if this was question 1, I definitely would have skipped it. Okay, I definitely would have skipped it. But The reason why I would have skipped it is I'm not saying that I would have just skipped it and done only the other questions. I would have skipped it, done the other questions, and then come back to it. Because hopefully by doing the other questions, like I said, I get enough knowledge to be able to answer this. Whereas if I had just tried to answer it off the bat, yeah, sure, I've had to try and read everything, right? So I would have had to try and read everything. But then in trying to read everything, I would have, yes, got the answer for this, but I wouldn't have got the answers for the other questions, if that makes sense. Whereas if I reverse the order and I do the other more specific questions, like this one, for example, King was third, hopefully by doing those questions, I can kind of simultaneously gain knowledge to take into that last question. Does that make sense? I know it seems quite long-winded what I'm trying to explain, but the point is the order in which you do the questions matters, and hopefully I can really demonstrate that. So here, this is a perfect example. Which of the following statements about the Roman Republic is most likely to be true? The Romans were successful both militarily and politically. Napoleon based a system of legislative structures used in his empire entirely of those used by the Roman Republic. The Republic was based upon democracy, was mostly run by dictatorships. The world is still influenced today by the Roman Republic. Okay, honestly, if I was to do this question, I wouldn't do this because you can see it's four completely random statements. So I'd just be wasting my time trying to go through and figure them out. So what I do instead is look at this one. When did the Romans believe the Roman Empire was formed? So this one's a little bit more specific potentially. Okay, so when do Romans believe? So here I see the exact date of the transition to the Roman Empire can be a matter of interpretation. Historians have variously proposed Caesar's crossing. Caesar's appointment as dictator for 544. Most, however, use the same date as the ancient Romans did themselves. The Roman Senate's grant of extraordinary powers and his adopting the title Augustus in 27 BCE as the defining event ending the Republic. So you can see one specific idea. Okay, so 27 BC, for example. So if I answer this one as 27 BCE, once again, which of the following statements is likely to be true? So here, from this, this one says you've got another four different ideas. So then I would go to this one. So how many people were traditionally the leaders of the Roman government? So now, if you look here, Roman government was headed by two consuls, elected annually by citizens, and advised by a senate composed of elected magistrates. Okay, so how many people are traditionally the leaders? So it says it's going to be two. So once again, I've got kind of two answers here. And so hopefully from these, even if I don't necessarily manage to get all the information for it, I've got some ideas, hopefully. Okay, so I know here, for example, I skipped to this bit here, but if I'd taken a bit of a glance over here, it says the Roman Republic was a period of Roman civilization beginning with the overthrow of the Roman kingdom, dated from 509, and then this was to 27. So the Roman Republic stood for over 500 years. I would have been able to rule that one out. And so here, I remember reading about Caesar. So it says he famously went across the Rubicon River in a boat in 49 BCE. So it says historians have variously proposed Julius Caesar's crossing. So I would say that this is potentially likely to be one of the true answers. Obviously, like I said, I'm not completely what's the word? Saying that this is the answer for sure, but I could have an idea. And if I wanted to guess, for example, I could just guess that this is and not spend too long on it. So I can still get somewhat an idea. Whereas if I tried to do it the first time, it would have taken me a long time because I'm trying to work out all these different ideas. And also, like I said, it's just a bit of a waste of a time because of the other questions you can definitely do a lot faster. Okay, so the order within the set matters as well. So within VR, the key idea is you either skip the entire set or you do it. Right? There's no half measures basically. You can't do like half and half because it doesn't really make sense. Okay, you've got to be able to commit. And so this passage, so whilst it is a bit of a longer one, it is something that I know a little bit about. I mean, I'm not an expert on like Roman history, but I know of the Roman Empire, and I've heard of the Roman Empire and like some of these names, which is why I was happy enough to do it. Okay, so fine, and then once again, go to the first one. Hopefully, maybe you can look here. So influenced by historical traditions. So world is still. So once again, you can probably guess this question here. World is still influenced today by Roman is probably most likely to be true. I would say. Okay, just because it's kind of one of the more generic broad terms, and this goes back to this idea of like if you wanted to guess. So for example, this set wouldn't be a dreadful one if you wanted to guess it. Okay, many of Rome's legal structures later clarified. But anyways, like I said, once again, I'm not sure if this is exactly right, but the point isn't that. It's just I'm trying to demonstrate some of the ideas I talked about in the video and how I'd incorporate it. And also I have done a VR walkthrough. Once again, it's under the verbal reasoning playlist. So I think that would also be another useful thing to look at. You can see me kind of incorporate some more of these techniques. So once again here, which answer is definitely false. So Augustus died in 31 BC. This has to be false because we know he had to, and is adopting the title Augustus in 27 BCE. So that's got to be wrong. Because remember, BCE kind of like works backwards. So this is before Common Era. So 31 BCE is 4 years before 27 BCE. So yeah. So once again, I guess this is a what's the word? This is one of the questions I was able to do because I'd read this question before. And this, I guess, this is the perfect one I was looking for to kind of like demonstrate what I was talking about. Okay, cool. Once again, what conclusion we draw about statistics and politics? Maybe it does point to a certain area, but nonetheless, it's four different ideas. Which the following statements refers to France. Okay, this one maybe I can potentially do because I can just look at France, but I'll probably still skip it. Okay, I'll probably definitely skip this one. Not used. So, which of the following phrase used by the author does not refer to statistics and its impact, real or imagined, in a positive way? So this one is probably scattered throughout the passages potentially. So once again, another one to skip. So actually, this one isn't that great of a passage to do, but I probably wouldn't have done it in the first place because I don't really like this style of passage. This article one feels a bit informal. It feels a bit too formal for me. This one seems okay. It's the most produced aircraft in history. More Cessna 170 have been built by more than any other aircraft, so that would be true. Registration of these used to set the world record was N613. So this is nice, so you can look specifically for it. Yes, registration of the Cessna 172. Actually, no, that's wrong, sorry. Little trick there. N7177, so that's false. Current design includes a straight tail fin, okay. High wing, maybe it's a can't tell. So, and the swept back tail fin that's, okay, so it's swept back. So that's going to be false. I don't know if it's straight. It says the original did. So yeah, STC can increase the engine power by 18%. Increase power from 180 to 210. So that's 30 over 180, which is a sixth. So it's going to be 30 divided by 180, which is 16%. But one sec, so what if we do 23 divided by 134? Is that going to be? I mean, I don't know if they're going to say that that's close enough. I'm not sure. Maybe it's false for that reason then. Okay, what's the most common type of Jerusalem syndrome? Once again, this is a specific idea you can look at. Type 1, most type of common. Okay, fine, whatever. This one definitely skip because, like I said, you can get these info by hopefully looking at. Oh, so here, Yusef Mahmoudia. You can specifically look at this guy and hopefully answer those questions. So read these statements and then look at Yusef Mahmoudia, whatever he is. And then theoretical excitement resulting from first cause hard to accelerate. This causes goodness shortness, leading to hallucination. Has worked extensively as a result of resulted from so first person diagnosed condition analysis. So this is wrong. This is probably going to be wrong. Has worked extensively with OTA. So that's probably this one. I mean, we kind of read that from what you said here. Okay. And then hopefully from that information, maybe you can kind of think about some of the. So C, Paris syndrome when a visitor is positively overwhelmed. I guess this could be true. But I don't know. Actually, probably not. Because if it's a syndrome, it's going to be a disease. Sorry, this one probably isn't going to be true. It's going to be a negative idea. These ones are triggered by visits to respective cities. So remember, before when I was doing about Jerusalem syndrome, it wasn't necessarily as well about like religion as well. It wasn't just. So actually, no, sorry. It is going to be probably this one. It says here triggered by visit to Jerusalem. So when I was reading that, I read that there. And then when they visit Paris or spend a vacation there. So once again, perhaps on my first read, if I was trying to go through all of this information, it wouldn't have made as much sense. But when I take the time and I choose the appropriate questions to do, it definitely makes more sense. Okay, which statement is most likely to be false? I would skip this one. Appropriate conclusion, especially a question like this. There's no need to be able to do a question like this right now. Come back to it. So why did the Soviet not know much more about the Spetsnaz? Details that's not want to know about them. Coverage, encourage the to identify. Okay, so then it will be perhaps said here somewhere. Used to know very little about the country until many state secrets were disclosed under the classes policy. Stories about have captivated the imagination. So details are considered a state secret, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. So we can identify the answer there. All the following statements are false. Once again, it's four completely unrelated ideas, but hopefully you can get some of those ideas, hopefully by doing some of the other questions. So I know that this is like a general idea. Like you can see here, for example, technically you've got three annoying questions here. So one, two, and three. So only this one really can you really focus in. But remember, one is still better than none. But the idea of, okay, you do question one, and using that knowledge, you can still hopefully get some info that works and helps you answer the other ones, even if it's just ruling out one answer or two. Okay, it does have a big impact. So that's just my very kind of quick detour um, through my strategy for verbal reasoning. And I think this is really important. And I guess the very last thing that I want to talk about as well, which is important, is in terms of kind of question sets. I think that's really important in terms of different ways. So I've talked about kind of how I go through the individual questions themselves, and now a little bit on to in terms of how you can take sets. So I know obviously a lot of people have difficulties reading. I think a lot of VR is underpinned by how fast can you read and how well can you comprehend, and I say that in my video as well. But I definitely think that one thing you can also think about is strategy in terms of how many questions you answer, right? If you try and answer 100% of the questions and you get 65% right, okay, why don't you try and answer 80% of the questions and see if you can get 70% right? Okay, that kind of idea. So sometimes even before going into it, you can be like, you know what, there's going to be one set I'm going to skip. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the last question, last set. It doesn't necessarily have to be the first set. Just the hardest one. Okay, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is doing things chronologically, and that goes for all the areas, especially decision making and QR and VR. I would say, but like probably in that order. So decision making is probably the most important, and to not do in the right order. Then QR, then VR. And by the right order, I mean sorry, not it's most important to not do it just chronologically. Okay, but as I was saying, I think it's really important to try out different things. And one of the phrases that I always say is that nothing changes if nothing changes. Okay, that sounds silly, it sounds obvious, but it's a fair point, right? If you keep doing the same things, keep answering questions in the same way, and you ask yourself, why aren't my scores improving? Probably makes sense. Okay, but what you need to do is try out different things in practice and try out different strategies. And I guess very just one other point to make is that sometimes you kind of just have to call it a day somewhere as well when it comes to some of the weaker sections. So especially verbal reasoning. You know, if you've been going at it, and your scores aren't seeing that massive an improvement, perhaps it's better to focus on areas like decision making and quantitative, which I definitely think are much more learnable, especially with like quantitative reasoning because the questions repeat, decision making because we have techniques for each of the questions and different ideas like that. Okay, so definitely give that a thought. Okay, so the which answering like that's what I mean by strategy. Which questions to answer? Do you answer five? Do you answer all 11 sets, or do you answer 9 or 10 sets? Do you try and do all the historical passages first? Do you try and do all the scientific passages first? Do you try and do all the article passages first? Because that's another thing as well. I'd normally say the passages are divided into those three main areas. For me personally, I haven't really done the whole like do the scientific ones first, then do the historical. But I do have preferences. I do prefer the scientific ones, and I probably hate the article ones that are to do with politics or economics. And I've expressed my disdain for these very many times before. But that's just a personal preference, right? I'm not advising you guys do that. And like I said, try out different things and experiment. Okay, so that's what really matters. So I hope this video was helpful. I know that it's not necessarily as much of a specific technique to talk about as in like decision making and quantitative reasoning, but I hope you guys can take on board what I mean about in terms of the ways to answer questions within a set. Right, so just because it's in a set doesn't mean you have to do it 1 to 4. You can pick out specific questions first, and then use the knowledge you've got from the specific questions to answer some of the broader questions immediately. So you can rule out answer options, as opposed to trying to waste time answering the broader question options. And then often when you are answering the broader questions, you might just not be getting them right anyways. Okay, so I hope that all makes sense. And so thank you as always for all of the support and for watching. I can't quite believe that we are close to even a figure like 2,000 subscribers. That's crazy. And so no, thank you to each and every one of you guys. You guys are honestly incredible, and you have made my summer. And I hope that these videos have been helpful. And please do let me know how you guys get on. It really does bring me a lot of joy and happiness. Knowing that I'm able to help people, and I would love to hear how you guys are getting on with your exams and when your exams are as well. So please do make sure to comment that down below. Okay, so thank you as always for all of your support. I hope this video is helpful. If you do have any questions, please do leave them down in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next video.